The White Sox have reached the quarter mark of the season, so let's discuss who's been the biggest surprises, the MVP and the LVP, and hopefully avoiding another historically awful season on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan. I write for SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the FanSided Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already, and also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. The White Sox have the same exact record through 41 games as they did in 2024. However, things feel just a little bit different, and let's discuss in the first two segments who's been the biggest surprise, who is the MVP, who is meeting expectations, and who is the least valuable player, all the while hoping the White Sox avoid another historic losing season. And then finally, how many wins is a Pope worth to his favorite team? I'll let you know what FanGraphs found out. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and right now new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. All right, so the White Sox were 12-29 at the quarter mark of the season last year, and they sit at the exact same mark this season. And a lot of those reasons are pretty similar to what they were in 2024. The bullpen has blown some chances to pick up some additional wins. There's a couple of games that the bullpen has blown. The team only has 2 saves this year, and I think 4 blown saves. And there's a couple of other games where, if the things go the White Sox way, instead of the bullpen not being able to keep the game tied, the White Sox have a few more wins. Also, the offense hasn't been very good, just like it was last year. Wasn't very good either. So there's a lot of the same issues, except for they are playing cleaner baseball. There isn't the comedy of errors that we saw, early and often last year. They're not getting shut out as much, for example, and they're managed way, way better. And plus, the Rockies, they might even be worse than the 2024 Chicago White Sox. Although they're not going to give Bud Black until August to see if he can turn things around, as he was fired over the weekend. An amazing concept. When it definitely looks like the season is going to be sinking into historically awful, maybe you might want to fire the manager who's in over his head. Instead, Pedro Grifol got to keep his job until August because the owner didn't want to pay him to do nothing. And then when they lost 21 games in a row, it became apparent, well, you are going to have to pay him to do nothing. Get him the heck up out of here. So at least the Rockies were like, you know what, Bud, you've been a loyal manager, but you got to go. So we'll see if that turns their season around, although, they're bad. I mean, and this has come from a White Sox fan, and I've seen bad, but I've watched a few of those Rockies games, and they are, whoa, that is bad. So obviously, I will go over in the second segment how they can even avoid, being historically awful, because it's just a few little simple things that need to happen. But the other thing about this season is there is this thing called hope, as you can start to see the outlines of who will make up the next good team that hopefully arrives in 2027. Whereas in 2024, at this point, all you could see was Corey Lee being the backup catcher of the future. That's all you could see. Because I think at that point, Jonathan Cannon was already sent back down to work on getting lefties out. I think Nick Nasharini was struggling, or maybe Cannon and Nasharini were up at that point, but they were still eventually going to be going back down because you got to give Brad Keller and Mike Clevenger starts. I mean, it was all sorts of, there was just no hope for the future. You couldn't see anybody at the big league roster that you could say, that guy's going to help us get back to being competitive soon. This year, you at least have Edgar Caro, Chase Mydroth, Sean Burke, Shane Smith, who I'll get to in a second, and even Mike Vassel. You at least have 5 guys that you could say, yeah, these guys are going to help win baseball games maybe by 2027. And obviously, it's become clear wins and losses truly don't matter this season since the Sox have already broken the record for futility. If they do it again, well, at least there's the chance to win the MLB Draft Lottery to mitigate it. There's a chance to pick among some great talent then in 2026 that could turn your franchise around. And they're saying it's a deep draft among the top 5. So you don't even need to win the draft lottery. You just got to be like in the top 5 to potentially get a cornerstone dude of a player. Whereas last year, you didn't have that because, again, of untimely losing 100 games in 2023 gave the White Sox a top 5 pick. They were ineligible. Now, obviously, hopefully they can still find a very good baseball player, with the 10th pick in the draft. But again, you would just like to be maybe a little bit further up in the draft to have your pick of the elite litter. So I want to go over who I would say is the MVP at the quarter mark of the season, some biggest surprises. I want to do that in the first segment. And in the second segment, I'll go over, who's been solid at least this year and who's been the team's LVP, least valuable player. So to me, the MVP and the biggest surprise is Shane Smith. The pitcher's just been outstanding. And think about it. The expectation was, I thought, maybe he's going to be a long reliever, maybe the fifth starter. Could he be the fifth starter? I think that's what we were all hoping for. Could he eat some innings, or at the very least, could they hide him in the bullpen since he was the number 1 pick in the Rule 5 draft? And he might be the team's all-star representative. I mean, his stuff screams ace. He's given off the same vibes Garrett Crochet did. Every time I keep watching Shane Smith pitch, every time I keep seeing that, the ball that, he makes that ball dance. It's exactly the same vibes that you get with Garrett Crochet. I mean, he's got a 2.08 ERA with a 3.04 FIP to go along with a 1.2 F4. He is leading the team right now in F4. No other player has an F4 above 1. And again, what has impressed me the most is when he does get some traffic on the base pass. He comes up with a pitch to get a critical double play. And that changeup is a thing of beauty. It's a masterpiece. And then obviously, since he can throw heat with some movement to it, it just makes it harder on hitters. So I love having this young man on the team. Obviously, the bar he still needs to clear is maintaining this pace. You want him to still stay on this, again, keep trending forward, keep trending towards being an ace. Obviously, working on getting through the order through the third time. Definitely has to get better at that. It has to build up his endurance. But on the flip side, that, endurance, being able to get through the third time in the order, being able to stay strong as he pitches, that's something that we're going to have to watch as the season progresses, is how does he handle his increased workload? Because the most innings he's ever thrown in the minors is 94 1/3 innings. So to me, if he is giving off Garrett Crochet vibes, handle him like you did with Garrett Crochet. Obviously, it's going to put basically one arm behind your back if you're pitching him 4 innings after July. But here's an idea that I'm just going to throw out there. Great opportunity to pair him up with, say, Grant Taylor, if he keeps overwhelming hitters at AA. I'm just saying. It's just a suggestion. You have Smith pitch the first 4, have Grant Taylor pitch maybe 3 innings, since that's what he's been doing. Could be a development plan. Just a suggestion. The other big surprises, I would say, is Lenyn Sosa's career is still hanging on. I was surprised that I'm still surprised that Lenyn Sosa's here. And I'm definitely going to say it's by a thread, because if he stops putting up a decent average, there isn't much there. He has a 74 WRC plus, a 24.1 strikeout percentage to a 2.8 walk rate, and an ISO of 0.86. So basically, he's all average right now. The only thing that I think is really keeping him on this team is a 257 average, and his expected numbers do indicate some hard luck, because his expected average is 281. His expected slug is 439. So you know how much the front office loves to cite bad luck. I mean, they're citing with Andrew Vaughn. So, but if he goes on a slump and you look at, the value numbers like the WRC plus, he is not, he is basically 26 points below average in terms of being a quality player, in terms of being a quality offensive player. Why would you keep that around? But the other surprise I will say is the 2 outs above average at second. Although it does get canceled out by the -2 defensive runs saved, but that indicates to me he's an average defender. And that's nice, considering he was a -6 DRS at third last year and a -3 DRS at second. So I want to give him some kudos. This isn't meant to be a slam at him. I just was like, again, I said in spring training, ride him until he can't hit anymore. So let's just keep going. But where I am pleasantly surprised is the cleaner baseball that he is playing defensively. Also, I didn't expect Matt Thaiss to be the best offseason addition, but here he is. And, he's a solid backup catcher. He's been pretty good behind the plate. Although, just don't have him catch Sean Burke. If you look at Sean Burke's numbers when he throws to Matt Thaiss compared to Corey Lee and Edgar Caro, completely different. He's just a different pitcher. It just doesn't seem like they have the chemistry. But he is, Thaiss is leading the lineup in F4 with 0.7. Mike Vassel, being a solid bullpen arm, also has been a nice surprise. He's that other Rule 5 guy that the Sox ended up getting through a waiver claim. Good pickup there, because he's been very good in long relief. Definitely looks like a guy you can have in that long relief role for the rest of the decade. And again, you need those guys. You need guys who raise your floor. You need guys who fit specific roles if you want to be competitive by 2027. I'm also pleasantly surprised by the front office, not giving a lot of these failing bullpen arms much grace. I'm very impressed that they are actually keeping most of these guys on a short leash. Last year, remember, we had to endure months of John Brebbia and Tim Hill and Justin Anderson and Dominic Leone just being awful and not being able to get outs. And think about this. Anderson didn't even make the team in spring training, and he was eventually DFA'd off the 40-man roster. Mike Clevenger couldn't command the ball and was DFA'd. Caleb Freeman, hey, nice win to get him to the majors, but he couldn't get outs, so he gets sent back down. Penn Murphy was given a month, and when it became clear he couldn't reclaim his promising career that was derailed by Tommy John surgery, boom, he's off the roster too. So this is what the team should be doing with the bullpen. Give guys a runway, but give them a tight leash. I'd like to see them eventually move on from Jared Shuster if he cannot turn it around quickly. And then finally, Miguel Vargas making that swing adjustment has made him look like he could be at least a 1.5 to 2 F4 player. And good for him to be willing to try something to keep his career from fading away. Well, let's get to who is meeting expectations and who is disappointing and how the Sox can avoid hopefully another historic losing season next on Locked On White Sox. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action, and FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Playing smart is going with the money lines, the over-unders, and the spreads. FanDuel has every day for the NBA playoff action that you're watching, but it's the futures, it's the props, and the parlays where you can win big. So, for example, FanDuel has a same-game parlay in tonight's Indianapolis and Cleveland game featuring Indianapolis on the money line, Pascal Siakam scoring over 20 points, and Tyrese Halliburton dishing out 10 assists and pulling down 6 rebounds. You put $10 on that going off at plus 2,889, and if it hits, you can win $288.92. And if you're a big Jokic fan and think, hey, you might score the first basket, that is at plus 650. And if that hits, you just won $65 if you put $10 on that. New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch a show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. All right, so right off the bat, I'm going to put Luis Robert Jr. in this gray area between meeting expectations and disappointment. He's impressing in that he's had a much better approach at the plate, and it's showing with his current career-high walk rate of 13.2%. I mean, think about that. His walk rate percentage was in single digits for the past 5 seasons until this year. He's obviously shown a much more patient approach at the plate, although it is still inconsistent because he is still swinging at that pitch down and in. And again, when there's a chance to just do a lot of damage, he is swinging freely. But he's also shown, a few times this season that he can win games almost on his own with his bat, his glove, and speed on the base paths. Just ask the Milwaukee Brewers. Where he's a disappointment is he's still not fully come out of his traditional, I hate playing in April cold funk. I mean, he's still hitting well below 200, and sore knees put him on the bench in that series against Miami. And it's killing his trade value. And I discussed that on yesterday's show. And again, the whole point of having Robert Jr. on the opening day roster until maybe Memorial Day was, okay, get through April healthy and then crush the ball in May to get traded to a team jumping the market. And if the 15th best prospect from the Mets is the best offer right now for a team willing to jump the market, now you got to extend the exercise of having him on the roster until July. You got to give LRJ at least 6 weeks to 2 months to get at that slash lineup, because you just can't be settling for Blake Tidwell. I'm sorry. I would even revolt against that. I mean, I've fully come to accept why Luis Robert Jr. has to be traded. But if it's for literally a penny on the dollar, no. Okay. Keep taking the gamble then. In terms of other solid production that I'm pleased with, got a few names to list, and then Andrew Vaughn, he's obviously my least valuable player. And then I'll give you a quick way the White Sox will avoid the historically awful repeat. In terms of, solid, the rest of the rotation, in terms of Sean Burke, Jonathan Cannon, and Davis Martin, I've been pleased with. Obviously they've had their ups and downs, but, obviously all of them are making the adjustment to where baseball has come for them, and they have been pretty solid for the most part. They have their question marks. There's still some things to work out. And yes, Burke needs to be throwing to Edgar Carroll from here on out, as again, he just doesn't seem to have the chemistry with Dice. But if he can continue to cut down on the walks, locate, keep his slider and his curve down, he's got the chance to join Shane Smith as two foundational pieces in the rotation. Davis Martin, I don't think is going to be on the team beyond the trade deadline. I mean, if he keeps pitching it this way, he's one of the few assets that maybe you could leverage for a decent piece. And the club control the club control clock is a little bit less than what you have on Burke and Smith. Cannon, still a wild card on where does he fit future-wise. But you are seeing him pitch much better after the adjustment was made to him, because they were like, okay, this guy's just a junk ball pitcher. Let's wait him out. He's been much better during his past couple of outings. Steven Wilson, he's been good since getting a second chance out of the bullpen, doing well in high leverage situations outside of this past, Sunday, but he's not going to be perfect every time. But I'm very impressed with him. I'd like to obviously see some more consistency out of Jordan Leisure and Brandon Eisert out of the pen, as those are especially Brandon Eisert. I know I hammered him, and I should give him his flowers, as he had 3 really good outings until the weekend. But I would so I get why maybe they are being patient with those two, because they're still relatively young. But you just keep giving these appearances where they get these big outs, like, again, Eisert had on that 3-game stretch, and then bam, back to reality, back to not being able to keep the game tied, back to not being able to get critical outs. In terms of LVP, you could say Jacob Amaya, obviously, since his numbers scream automatic out, but he's been reduced to a late inning defensive replacement, and you just hope he can lay down a late game sacrifice bunt. And I have a feeling, and I'll talk about it tomorrow, I have a feeling he will eventually be off the roster with all these guys coming back off the IL. But if you've been listening to the show, the guy I've been hammering is Andrew Vaughn. And the numbers have been awful, and it's obviously 1 step forward, 2 steps back this season. And he has a knack for killing rallies with either a strikeout or a base running gaffed. And at $5.8 million, when you have very precious financial resources this year, it's $5.8 million wasted. That money could have been used, in much more critical areas to not only help the team obviously be a little bit better than the historically awful 2024, but also, again, get bullpen arms that, maybe you could trade at the trade deadline. Just saying. I know I sound like a broken record, but that's the reality. That is the reality of Andrew Vaughn's struggle having an impact on this franchise. Andrew Vaughn not even realizing his potential, while Bobby Witt Jr. is just raking for the Royals, and then Riley Green for the Tigers. Your 2 division rivals are benefiting from the 2019 draft, and you are not. That's why I always have Andrew Vaughn as the LVP. Because if he was even just decent, obviously not great from a number 3 pick, but at least in context, you could say, hey, we're getting some contributions, but he has been just killing you. Although I did go over on yesterday's show how Tim Elko's presence might get the best version of Vaughn. And if that's the case, and he's producing better and he keeps it up through, say, the next 6 to 8 weeks, hey, Boston, we got a guy you can plug in to replace Tristan Cassius. Might not cost you much either. Just give us a prospect that might be a reliever at the big league level, like a legit shot to be a reliever at the big league level, like a Winkelman Gonzalez, who the White Sox just moved to the pen at AAA Charlotte. And finally, there's one simple and easy way the White Sox can avoid repeating their historically awful 2024 record. And even this is for the Rockies, too. Through the next 40 games, just have a better record than 9-31. That's it. Because that was the White Sox record from game 41 to 81. They went 9-31. That's how bad they were. And then I have from games 82 to 122. Win more than 8 games. Because that was the next quarter point of the season that the White Sox went. They won 8 games from 82 to 122. So it's just simple math. Because being at the same record at this point as the team was in 2024, in context, actually doesn't mean anything because at this point in 2024, the Sox were actually playing decent baseball. I remember doing shows about, hey, maybe they're fun bad. A lot of us podcasters, Sox podcasters, were doing, hey, the White Sox could be fun bad this year. Because they did go on a stretch of 11-8 from April 26th to May 15th. And that's where they got to 14-30. And then everything just disintegrated. You can't even say it fell apart. I mean, started on fire. It was like a nuclear blast of the season because they went 27-91 for the rest of the season. So just be a little bit better, and at least you avoid losing 121 games again. All right, so I'm finally going to be able to tackle the new Pope being a Sox fan and just how much having that divine assistance will be discussed after the break on Locked On White Sox. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode and recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. All right, so the best part of the new Pope being from Chicago is the entire world, or at least the country, got to find out just how important it is to pick a side in Cubs and Sox. All right, because that was obviously the biggest angle of Cardinal Robert Prevost, from the south side of Chicago becoming Pope Leo XIV. Now, that was the thing that I thought was the most interesting part. Not that he's going to become the most recognizable person in the world. And yes, being the Pope probably makes you the most recognizable person in the world. But that it was, wait, he's from Chicago? Is he Cubs or Sox? You know, not, is he against ketchup being put on hot dogs? What does he order at Patillo's? Has he ever been to the Wiener Circle? Nope, it was Cubs or Sox. And think about it. WGN sent a camera crew out to his brother's house to find out if he was Cubs or Sox. After the rumor came out, he was a Cubs fan. And even when I heard that, I mean, unless you're Ron Coomer, who was a heck of a ball player, so he gets some grace from deviating from living on, growing up on the South Side, but not rooting for the South Side team. There's no way. If you grew up within the radius of Comiskey Park, you're growing up a Cubs fan. I'm sorry. I just don't believe it. I mean, yes, can you get deviations like me from the North Burbs? Yes, you can. We do exist. And I'm not saying that Cubs fans living on the South Side don't exist. It's just, it's the neighborhood. It's the identification of the South Side and the White Sox being the South Side's team that draws a lot of people being White Sox fans in that area. I mean, look at the heat map. The Cubs pretty much dominate the north side, most of downtown, and most of the suburban area. The White Sox, they have their little blob right by their ballpark and for some reason in Schaumburg. And then, yes, you get us few that are like, you know what? Frank Thomas was awesome. Or you get those, people that grew up with the 2005 White Sox team, that type of stuff. And for those that don't pick a side, I don't know how you sleep at night. I really don't. Pick a side. Take a stance. Okay? Cubs or Sox. I mean, no. One of the reasons why, yes, I'll admit, I grew up watching Cubs games too with my grandpa. He was a Sox fan, then he vowed off and swore off the White Sox when they moved to cable because he believed television should be free. It was our thing, battling White Sox and Cubs. I did watch games with them, but deep down, I was always like, I should be watching Darkwing Duck right now. That was another reason why I never really liked the Cubs, because WGN, when I was growing up, had the best afternoon cartoons. And if the Cubs were on, I couldn't watch DuckTales. All right? Rescue Rangers. I wanted to watch Rescue Rangers and Tailspin. But no, I got to watch the Cubs. Ugh. So while it would be great for the new Pope to sit down with Jerry Reinsdorf and tell him, sell the team, I'm not sure God would want the Pope involved in a $1 billion transaction. There's something about greed, I think, in the Bible that says probably not a good thing. That doesn't mean there might not be some divine intervention. As Michael Bowman of FanGraphs found out, here's what he found regarding some previous popes' favorite soccer teams. And you got to remember, all those prior popes were European or from South America, where soccer is king. So John Paul II, he grew up at KC. Oh, I'm going to totally butcher this name. And my college roommate was from, he was from Polish descent. Let's see, KC Czechoslovakia. So he grew up basically a soccer fan in Poland, and his favorite team, this is what Bauman writes, achieved promotion to the second division in 1978, the season before their most famous fan was elected Pope. And in 1982-1983, they reached the first division and took part in their first European-wide Cup competition before falling on hard times again. The Pope, John Paul's favorite team, because I'm going to butcher the name, got promoted back to the first division again in the final year of John Paul's II papacy, 2004 through 2005, and with one interruption, it has remained in the top flight ever since. Sorry, I had to hit the cough button again as I'm still dealing with this, after effects of a cold. All right, so Pope Benedict, he was a Bayern Munich fan. This is what Bowman writes. Ratzinger was one of the most powerful figures in the Vatican for almost 25 years before he became Pope. So too Bayern Munich in Germany and European soccer. When white smoke emerged from the 2005 papal conclave, Bayern Munich was on its way to its 14th Bundesliga title since Ratzenberg had been elevated to cardinal in 1977. Ratzenberg's 28-year tenure as cardinal also saw Bayern Munich win 11 domestic cup competitions, plus the 2001 Champions League. But as you can see, Bayern's fortunes got even better under the papacy of Benedict XVI. It was during the late 2000s that Germany's biggest club consolidated its stunning run of dominance. And then when it comes to Pope Francis, he was a fan of San Lorenzo. San Lorenzo won 2 league titles and a Copa Sudamerica, South America's second-tier continental club competition, when Bergoglio was a cardinal. Within 15 months of Francis's election to the papacy, San Lorenzo won another league title, its last to date, plus the 2014 Copa Libertadores, which is South America's version of the Champions League, inarguably the Cubs' most prestigious result in its history. Having already mentioned the 2014 World Cup, I'd be remiss if I didn't also take notice of Argentina's victory in the 2022 World Cup. Indeed, Francis was the first sitting pope since Pius XI in 1938 to watch his home country win the World Cup. So, while maybe Pope Leo XIV may not get the White Sox to the World Series through his divine connection, there could be some hope that this could be another golden age of White Sox baseball. Obviously, lots of prayer will be needed because Jerry Reinsdorf still owns a team. But hey, you got some promising prospects that have the Sox maybe having better days. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And I'll be back tomorrow to go over the Sox facing some interesting roster decisions when some guys come off the IL. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding the Sox status at the quarter mark of the season and how much having the Pope be your fan of your team can impact your favorite team. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at ToddJW or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at LockedOnWhiteSox@gmail.com. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.